So, this talk is called The Financial Sector as the Return of the Lacanian Big Other. The thesis is that the operations of the financial sector, in the Deleuzian sense, code or territorialize the presence and futures of the social body, with the sector acting as a virtual decentered brain or spirit. Point 1. It was von Hayek who discovered the communicative or coding power of the price mechanism. He believed that if you had a product, such as a pen, that the price in the store to buy this pen perfectly communicated the exact amount of forces or exact level of required force to bring together the steel, the plastic polymers, the bamboo wood, the gold-plated trim. Each part of the pen came from a different part of the planet, was harvested, the raw material was harvested, processed, and packaged into this final product, and then placed on a shelf, and then the store itself adds its added price to this pen. But the final price that I am willing to pay for it, both communicates my exact willingness to pay for it, the store's willingness to part with it, and the exact level of forces of the harnessing of the raw materials and processing and packaging and product placement of this pen. Von Hayek used his example as a pencil, but a pen achieves the same effect. So the power of the price mechanism is to take infinitesimal amounts of data and amalgamate them to exact, precise measures and place them. A product in a store is really the full powered processing power of the economic brain, the total capital economic brain, to deliver that product. And it does this for an infinite number of products with an infinite number of materials, locations, forces. As Marx said, capitalism unleashed the greatest productive powers known to mankind, and it does just this. So von Hayek named the price mechanism, and the virtual entity hovering above this price mechanism is the virtual of the economic brain, but here we're discussing especially or particularly the financial economic brain. Point 2. The financial sector determines virtually from heaven on downwards the material existence of, amongst other things, stockholders, investors, pension funds, real estate values, everything's relative valuation and valuative position. So from the fluctuations of a stock, the operations of a hedge fund betting on a stock, shorting a stock, or buying a long position in a stock, or other derivatives, all of these operations intersect, and the operation of a hedge fund might affect the value of a pension fund, might affect the value of a stock held by investors saving for retirement, saving to buy a house, and their relative positions of valuation. Everything from, if you think about your house sits and you have no control over the value of your house other than to renovate it once in a while, but even when you do, the ultimate value of your house is relative to every other house, not only in your town and your neighborhood, but in the broader state or province that you live in, broader country, the continent. And these operations, as we saw in 2008 with the housing bubble, we saw that the financial sector could package thousands of mortgages together to create bonds, and these bonds were sold to investors. In the meantime, the value of houses was increasing steadily and by great proportions, and there was an overinvestment in housing. But also for the people that didn't build a new house but had their original house, its value shot up as well. They had no power over the relative valuative position of their house, but the operations of the big investment banks and the loaning companies like Countrywide, which I think was the biggest loaning company for creating these mortgages, these operations that are beyond anybody's control determine the valuative position, your ability to retire, your ability to save to buy a new car or a new house, your ability to save to meet a financial security goal. All these are out of your control. The best that one can do is to go to a retail bank and open a portfolio, but even then they siphon off a managing expense ratio, so if your stock goes by 8%, they siphon off 2%. But even worse, the underlying products that they sell you, the mutual funds they may sell you, or the stocks that they may buy on your behalf, they have no control. I think it's something like 85% of mutual funds perform worse than the overall market. And actually, many vastly underperform the market. And so when you have a portfolio, which is the best thing that you can have in a pension fund, the value of the pension fund is even invested. I think in the 2008 crisis, many pension funds moved to invest in the mortgage bonds because they had a higher return than the government bonds, much higher return. And so many pension funds moved into the mortgage bond process and housing bubble. But we'll notice that these are all economic forces out of our control, even though we all actively create these conditions. If we were to sit at home and do nothing and read and just sit for 6 months, things would be taken out from under our feet, the rug would be ripped out from under our feet, and we would have no power over this. If you're active, you think you may have control, but you do not. So the financial sector determines virtually from heaven on downward. So what does this mean? So Marx, in his book, The German Ideology, says that we are, in our ideology, in this Marxist ideology, we're determining the conditions of man from concrete grounds on skyward, from earth to heaven, not from heaven to earth. But Marx, perhaps he realized this, but he did not so explicitly state it, that precisely the capitalist economic system in its virtual existence does exist in the heavens and then dictate downwards. It doesn't work from the concrete productions on upwards. It dictates from the abstract, from the heavenly, ethereal position. It dictates what the conditions, the concrete conditions are. I think there was some quote that said that when rich developed countries trade with industrial developing countries, the rich developed countries can dictate the price of any transaction that they have with this developing country. They set the price. This is especially true of the United States, which has the world's reserve currency. But the world developed countries can always set the cost and the transaction cost and also the price that they're willing to pay for a given commodity from a production country, from an industrial developing country. And so you have the money, the abstract currency, the mediating force that is held by the developed countries, the rich countries, and they can tell to each factory in each Asian country, we will not buy at this price, we will sell it to us at this price. Similarly, the capitalist economic spirit, as we'll call it, the virtual entity, dictates the exchange of money takes place, the exchange of immaterial financial transactions, the digital balance sheet of the accounts of the major hedge funds and major investors, and valuation of the major companies that are held in stock. They fluctuate according to the virtual, not to actual. It's spurred by activity from the ground. but the actual determination of the price is made on the abstract plane. It's made up here, not down here. And so that brings us to point 3. It's beyond anybody's control. So even though, as I will get to point 5, the market is spurred by the frenetic activity of managers, investors, and market participants. If none of these participants can sit out, or even when they're active, they have no actual impact. It's actually just they're taken as an aggregate, and that aggregate has an impact. But as individual market players, it's beyond anybody's control to say, let's stop this system, or let's withdraw from this system. Let's think, let's be clear, let's have some clarity. Or let's not engage in this practice or that practice. No, it's institutional incentives and the abstract movement of that stock price, of the price mechanism, the brain mechanism that we described under von Hayek. The price mechanism, money. Money is divorced. Money is one step removed, or one dimension removed from the underlying commodities for which it is used to exchange. Money sets and determines things like money supply sets and determines the prices, the relative prices of everything in a given country, and it is the mediating substance between the abstract forces, the abstract, ethereal, heavenly, and I don't want to make the association that the economic spirit is a heavenly spirit, but in some terms it is, in the respect that I mean it is above us, and it determines what we do. And in this sense, I would say it is the Lacanian Big Other, the return of the Lacanian Big Other. Whereas Lacan said that God did not exist, the Big Other does not exist, even though humans act as if it does exist, and therefore it could be said to exist in the fact that they meditate on the issue of the Big Other or God. Human beings meditate on God, and therefore he exists in that sense, and they act as if he exists, so therefore he exists in that sense. However, this is not this is a virtual entity that has material consequences. It's not a meditation. It's not an idea or a representation in the mind. It is it's virtual, but it exists in the ethereal space, such that the market actors in aggregate gather in the clouds. Their actions get sent to the cloud above the clouds, and then the price reaches down and determines like we said, the pension funds, the investors, the retirement funds, the value of houses, the value of stock. Point 4, this was originally the production of economic ideology, namely the neoliberal ideology spread by von Hayek with the founding of the Mount Pelerin Society. I think it was in the 1950s or 40s that he founded it. The neoliberal ideology attempted to name what it thought existed out there. So it did so successfully. It named what was a capitalist beast. And in return, it could have claim to being, in its own terms, the rightful ideology. This is not a normative claim. This is more of a factual claim that they were correct about the structure of the economic market. So the neoliberal ideology initially gave it the political backing. Not that it needed any political backing, but it received political backing with the neoliberal ideology. But even more than this, the more concrete, coming from ethereal origins to the concrete ground. Point 5 is that the virtual of this economic spirit or economic brain or economic entity, the Big Other, I will call it, the return of the Lacanian Big Other, the Neoliberal Big Other. That's a good name for it, the Neoliberal Big Other. is the virtual of the inevitable frenetic activity of managers, investors, and other market participants. So like we said, if you sit at home for 6 months, your house will be taken out from under you like a rug. So you cannot boycott this system. Even when you act in concert with billions of other people and billions of other market makers, participants, managers, investors, etc. None of which no individual can call a stop. They cannot even accumulate enough of a group amongst themselves to call a stop to the economic decisions made in the ethereal heavens. And so what is their only option? Their only option is to participate and try to earn an income, try to earn a living, try to earn rents from the system such that they can live comfortably. So they think. Live comfortably, live off the fruits of their labor or their decisions, their investments. But in this saying yes to the system, which you have a forced choice. It is a choice that was given to you that you had no option but to say yes to. But once you have said yes, you agree with the other billions of people, and then in aggregate your actions form this virtual entity you have no control over, and yet you produce it. You have no control over it, and yet you produce it in your actions with billions of others. The conclusion is that the attachment, let's say, of the revolutionary subject to an external cause to reach some level of transcendental subjectivity is made forlorn. What can you do in the face of this new big other, this new Lacanian big other, which is not so much, it is real rather than representational. It is not the same as the Christian God being just representation in the mind. It is real. It actually exists in space as a virtual entity in the ethereal space. So, but that makes it, the virtuality makes it materially real, concrete. Under the virtual become concrete manifestations. Your house is worth this much. You can extract this much rent or income. Your stocks are worth this much. Your pension is worth this much. These are concrete determinations made by the virtual entity. It is, so like I said, it is virtual and then thus material rather than representational and imagined. It is more of a dragon rather than a great spirit. It is more like smog rather than a great spirit. More like a dragon. So to think about this, it's a dragon that sits on the monetary system. So it is like it's like Smog in the Hobbit movies. It sits on its hoard of gold and mets out what can be given, and usually it retains most of the value into its own decision, and it produces concrete realities. So it breathes fire and it burns the village and produces concrete realities for the plebeians and even for the bourgeoisie, because they have no more control over it than anybody else. I hope this was enlightening. I hope to do future talks and kind of combine Lacanian psychoanalytic theory, Deleuzian philosophy, Zizek'ian philosophy, and others to my understanding of the economic system, corporate finance, economics, etc. Taking really here if you want to read a good book, it's called The Relevance of the Communist Manifesto by Slavoj Žižek, where he talks in very similar terms about the virtual entity of the money-to-money system of capitalism. Money, product, money is the mathematical expression of capitalist economy. It goes from money to money. So you produce a commodity using money, you buy capital, you produce a commodity, and then you sell it, and then you get money back, and you use money turned into more money, essentially. So think about this. I believe that the financial sector today the postmodern financial sector is the return of the Lacanian Big Other, only in this sense in virtual and then material manifestation, real manifestation, rather than the representational idea of the Christian Big Other. It is more of a real dragon that actually exists. So, till next time, take care.